Today's episode is presented by the Harmony Acre Soap Company. Please go to getsmelly.com, enter code LoudMouth10 at checkout to get 10% off your entire order. Again, the Harmony Acre Soap Company. Go to getsmelly.com, enter code LoudMouth10 at checkout to get 10% off your entire order. All right, guys, on today's episode, I interviewed Jordan Young, a pretty good, very young middleweight prospect in Bellator. We had a great conversation, most of it, of course, not being about him. It was about everything else, as many of these interviews tend to go. But anyway, just a great conversation. I'm a big fan of this guy now, and I look forward to watching him fight. He's pushing real hard to get on, I can't remember offhand right now. I'm recording this after the fact, but one of Bellator's cards they have in April. He's really wanting to get on that card. So let's make it happen, man. Let's get this interview out there. Let's get this passed around. Let's get people listening to it. Let's get people knowing about this guy. He's really, really young. He's 22 years old in the middleweight division. He's big guy for being a middleweight. He's about 6'4". So this is an interesting guy. All right, let's get him through the ranks in Bellator, and let's get him over, to maybe the UFC one day. So, all right, guys, I hope you enjoy the episode.
This is Jordan Young, and you're listening to the LoudMouth MMA podcast.
You got a gun, you got a big gun, you got a gun, it's not a real one, and all you ever think about is running away, all you ever think about.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the LoudMouth MMA podcast. I, of course, am your host, Kyle Steele. Today, a special treat, a bonus episode. We got Jordan Young, who just fought in Bellator. I believe it's Bellator 171, relatively recently. That was at the end of January. So we got him on. I don't know a lot about Jordan. I obviously watched that fight, but I hadn't seen anything prior. Looked impressive. Very, very dominant victory. The other thing I noticed, I think most people notice, for being a 185er, he's a big guy. Not a lot of 6'4" people are 185. So excited to learn more about him. I hope you guys are excited to learn more about him as well. Jordan, how's it going?
Good, my man. Thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome. I could just start abruptly and go, tell me about yourself, and then just mute it and let you go. but I'll guide you more than that, because that's a hard thing to do. I always hate that. They do that in interviews. Like, tell me about yourself. Like, what do you mean tell you about myself? Like,
what do you want to know?
Yeah, like start listing stuff off like Mad Lib style. Like, I don't really know. That's a hard question to answer. So let's just start pre-Bellator, right? So obviously Bellator is a much bigger promotion than what you were in before then. You fought out of what's called the MCC, which I'm not familiar with. What's that stand for?
MCC stands for Midwest Cage Championship.
Midwest Cage Championship. And then Victory FC, which is definitely something that I've heard of. A lot of people have heard of Victory FC. So that's a big promotion, Victory FC, as far as the regional circuit's concerned. But Bellator is definitely a notch up. Bellator is a good promotion. I know a lot of people love to hate on Bellator, but it's really unwarranted. Bellator is doing great things. I don't, they give people a chance who the UFC isn't really ready to do yet, or a lot of the older guys who the UFC has given up on for kind of no reason. Bellator takes them and they continue to have a good career. But they also give guys like yourself a chance, right away, where the UFC, they're going to make you wait longer, so to speak. So,
yeah.
But anyway, you fought at Bellator 171. That was your first fight in Bellator. Kind of what did that feel like? Did you notice a difference between your prior fight and that fight, as far as the crowd, the nerves, anything like that? Did you feel a difference at all?
Not necessarily. My last fight before that, though, was almost a year prior. I think I fought on February 19th was my fight before this last January 27th fight for Bellator.
It was.
So it had been quite a while, but the crowd was about the same, roughly like 4,000 people for each show. And honestly, Bellator, you notice the little fine details. Like when I got there, they hit me with a little bit of cash for my pocket, take care of my corners and stuff like that. So I definitely noticed that. But as far as like the actual process of fighting and everything, it's all the same.
Okay, but so it didn't really feel. I always wondered. I get different answers depending on kind of who I talk to, of course. But sometimes they say that the nerves are different, or some people say they felt more comfortable with more people, or you know what I mean. It kind of changes depending on the person. Now, how come you wound up taking a year off?
That wasn't really by choice. I fought in February, and then I was traveling a little bit. Prior to that February fight, I had just fought at the end of November. So it was 2 fights in 3 months. So I felt like I wanted to take a little time. So from, let's say, March to May, I kind of was enjoying myself. Still in the gym training, but I was doing a little bit of traveling, trying to figure out my next move. I'm a young guy. I'm only 22 years old. And I'm in a great position at the time where I was only 21 that I could move to a different state to set up, my camp, if you will. I was at a point in Iowa where things were getting stagnant. I had great training partners, but I was one of the only guys that was full-time. So I was looking to find a place and set up an American Top Team, and I signed with my first management company, first-round management with Abe and Maurice and Malky, all these guys. And I also signed with Bellator, I think, August 2nd. So I was kind of on the shelf there for a minute. I was trying to fight. Every day I'm calling my managers trying to get a fight lined up, and it just wasn't working out in my favor. So I had to be patient and get better as a fighter at American Top Team. And so I put in a solid, I would say, 6 months there, just training with no fight. And then I was blessed with the opportunity to get on at the end of January, and I took the best of that, made the most of it.
Definitely, and linking up with First Round. I mean, not to. I don't want to plug them too much, just because I use so many different management companies for all these fighters I talk to. But of the management companies, they're definitely a top tier one for me. For multiple reasons. Of course, if you look at the people they have, it's incredible. But, I do I have to reach out all the time. I'm constantly doing interviews. And that's a management company that's been really receptive. So I want to give a shout out to them. You already just gave a shout out to them, of course. But I also want to give a shout out. It's a great management company. So good job linking up with them. Because they'll help you go a lot further. Now, there's 2 things you mentioned there that I want to go into detail about. One, you're 22 years old, which is insane, because I'm 27, which, isn't that much older, right? Like, you were like a freshman when I was graduating high school or something. Like, it really isn't that big of a difference. But now that I'm 27, it feels so different, because I can't even, I can barely remember when I was 22, to be honest with you. It's kind of an odd thing there. So it's incredible that you're already doing so well at 22, and the amount that you're going to learn. You're not even at peak. You kind of hit your peak athletic, whatever you want to refer to it as, until your late 20s. That's where you really start hitting, all your different hormones are leveled out and your brain's finished growing. And so you're accomplishing this, and you're not even at your peak athletic prowess or whatever you call it. I don't even know what the terminology is, but so that is definitely incredible, man. I think you might be one of the youngest guys I've talked to. So that's awesome that you're already in Bellator. And let's talk about that fight. You fought Chris Harris, who also was undefeated going in and had more fights than you, actually. He was 8-0 at the time when you guys fought. You were at the time 5-0. You're now 6-0. And
yeah.
Did you have a long time to prepare for that one? You said you took a lot of time off. However, was that fight booked long enough out to kind of have a full camp and prepare for your opponent?
Yeah, for sure. So I didn't know anything about Chris until, I think I had 9 weeks notice, or maybe 10 weeks. So plenty of time. We didn't start actually ramping the camp up and getting a lot of sparring in and whatnot until 6 weeks out. So I didn't know too much about him, but I for sure was just hungry. It wouldn't have mattered if it was Chris or the next person. I was just hungry for that call, and when I got it, I was ecstatic for sure.
Yeah, wonderful, man. And you went in there and decisively won, which that's a big deal. When you signed up with Bellator, because I'm not 100% sure how Bellator works, did you have to sign a kind of like a multi-fight contract?
Yeah, that's what I signed with them. I signed a 4-fight deal, I believe, for a year and a half, I believe. But okay. Honestly, I just was in a situation where I had moved out of the Midwest. All my connects were in the Midwest, and I wasn't happy with my options and what was going on in the Midwest as far as pay and what I felt I should be getting paid for what I bring to the event as well as, but we won't even get into that. Really, I was just in a situation where I was hungry to get out of my last situation, so I jumped on it for sure. And maybe a part of that is being young, or
No, I mean, I think you should. I mean, here's the thing. I'm not a manager by any stretch of any imagination. I'm not a manager. I'm not a fighter. I've never even been to like a gym. You know what I mean? Like that kind of a gym. Never been in my life. So, this is just coming from me wherever I'm coming from. But I would kind of prefer younger guys to do it like this. I think jumping into the UFC, I think it can hurt people's careers. They get going too soon. And a guy who, and I don't want to speak too ill, but a guy who I think this happened to is Louis Smolka. I think Louis Smolka is a fantastic, amazing fighter. I think he rushed a little bit, and he's so young, and he's going to be out of the UFC before he's even 24 years old or 25 years old, and then and hopefully he'll come back. But that's a concern. You do see that a lot. You see some of these young guys. Look at Sage Northcutt, right? Yeah. That's a guy who got into the UFC, got into the limelight way too soon. He needed time to build up, and
I think, though, not to interrupt you, brother, but what I think there is when you name two different types of guys, and Louis Smolka, I'm not too familiar with this guy, but he's a 25er, right?
Yeah, he's a 125er.
Yeah, so with the difference between those two guys, I think it worked out in Sage's benefit. He's not on his way out the door quite yet, but I don't know exactly what Luis got paid, but I'm going to imagine it was what everybody else gets paid on their entry level, and with that, I would say that that's not the best thing, because now you're out at 24, you have that X on your back, you know what I mean? You're a UFC vet, and you have to work your way back there. But with a guy like Sage, he got in and they paid him well. He didn't make what the average entry-level fighter makes, and I think that with him, I know for sure that he probably took that money, and he comes from wealth as it is, but I'm sure he got himself a couple nice things, and he's in a good spot. So there's different levels to it,
Yeah, for sure. And man, just bringing up fighter pay could lead to an hour-long conversation, because it's guys like Louis Smolka is probably, like you said, on that kind of entry-level pay, and that entry-level pay is far too low for what they should be making. Far too low. And this is across all promotions. Bellator is just as guilty as this as everybody else. It's just MMA in general have they very, very underpaid fighters for what you guys have to go through, and the just absolute, ravaging that happens to your bodies. I mean, it's some fighters are able to escape it more. It depends on your style, right? Like a guy like GSP, right? If you have a GSP style, you're not going to take a lot of damage. But for the most part, a guy like Chuck Liddell, you know what I mean? He's taken or has taken just copious amounts of damage throughout his career. Probably the only good thing about MMA, obviously, you're not seeing as much of the brain issues that you do in boxing. Now, I guess we don't fully know because it hasn't been long enough, but I don't necessarily think you are, because the problem with boxing is that you're taking repeated blows with soft gloves that aren't knocking you out. So your brain is getting more and more and more bruised, but you're still conscious. Where in the UFC, when you take one or two shots, you're just immediately out. So you're not taking nearly the amount of – it's reverse. See, anyone who's not like a fan of UFC – or even a fan of boxing, I think in their heads they would go, oh, MMA is way more dangerous. It's not. Yeah. Because you're not taking as much damage. It looks like you are, but you're not. Because when you really take a shot that puts you out, you're out. In boxing, you can take 50 shots, each one of them increasing that bruise on your brain, but because the gloves are padded and stuff, you don't fully go out. So yeah, that's an interesting thing.
I like to take that and equate it to like computers. You know what I mean? If you think about it like boxing, you might get flash knocked down, but you got those 10 seconds to get up. That's turning the computer off, but then you restart it right away. Within MMA, if you go out, there's 10 seconds, it's off, and you need to go rest for 6 months before you take any more shots to the head.
Yep, exactly. No, that's a really good way of looking at it, because that's exactly what it is. Again, when you go down and you see guys who they go down to the ground and they kind of daze off for just a second. This happened in that Korean Zombie comeback when he fought Dennis Bermudez. You kind of saw it with that, where Korean Zombie took him down, landed 2 or 3 shots. Bermudez was out. The referee stops it. within a quarter of a second of the referee stopping it, Bermudez was back. He's back, eyes open. He was ready to go again, right? But the fight had been stopped. And in boxing, he would have been able to stand up and keep fighting, which would not have
it happen again and again.
Yep, which would have not been a good thing. So the one thing with MMA is once something's done, it's done. You know, when your eyes roll in the back of your head, they stop it. And usually within 30 seconds, those guys are coming to, right? And they're fine. But you would have been fine if you had continued to take shot after shot after shot. So yeah, that's a good way of putting it with the computer. I like that. That's a good way of putting it, because that's kind of what it is. I don't know how we got on this subject, but I like it. This is that's an interesting one.
My man, for sure. I'm interested to see. You know, boxing has been around for so much longer than MMA too. I'm interested to see, you know, what some of these studies later in life show on MMA fighters. You know, because you got guys like Muhammad Ali and a lot of these great. Rest in peace to Muhammad Ali. But a lot of these great boxers were having brain troubles, or currently are. And you don't necessarily see that in MMA, and that's because MMA hasn't aged that far along yet. You know, we don't know what Chuck Liddell is going to look like, or Vanderlei Silva is going to look like in years from now. So
yeah, I am also interested in, and not necessarily in a good way. I'm interested because it's, you know, I am concerned because you guys do take, while yes, you're not necessarily taking repeated stuff once you're unconscious and things like that. It's still, you're still getting, you know, taking a lot of damage. So.
Yeah,
we'll see. I mean, I hope not. I think some of these guys who were in these wars, especially back in Pride, where you could bicycle kick people in the face when they're laying on the ground, you know, and that was long enough ago that I feel like if we were going to see negative effects, we'd have already seen them by now. Or at least more of it. I mean, there's guys like Gary Goodrich, you know, who's come out and has had some short-term memory stuff. But again, he was taking shots that you guys aren't taking now. In the UFC, you're not getting this same type of damage that a guy like Don Fry was getting in Pride. It's not even remotely the same thing anymore. Especially with all you don't have people who are on, you know, testosterone. So, you know what I mean? Like a lot of the steroids have been cleaned up. Allegedly. Agreed. Agreed. There's still issues, but we have to at least be able to admit it's not nearly as rampant as it was 15 years ago. I mean, there's certainly still a lot of usage, I'd think. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's worse now because it's that much more undetectable. So yeah, I wonder if it really is that much more, whether it is actually better. But anyway, let's move on past this. As interesting as this is, let's figure it out. So you just fought in January, late January. So it's only been about a month, almost literally a month.
Rolling up on a month.
When are you looking to get back in?
Honestly, I was just tweeting to Bellator. I've been tweeting and adding them on Instagram all week. I would like to. I'm healthy. I made it out of fight 100% healthy. Not a scratch on me. This kid didn't touch me, and that was an undefeated fighter in his hometown. So I would like to get back in there as soon as possible. I would like a camp though. I don't want a short notice fight. I'd like a camp, and honestly, I would love to be back in there on April 21st in Connecticut. They're going there. My teammate from American Top Team and the 145 champ for Bellator, Daniel Strauss, is going to be on that card. I would love to roll into Connecticut with him and represent the best gym in the world and hold it down.
There you go. That seems super reasonable. I mean, 3 months out. Yeah.
Not only this, but I'm telling you right now that if they give me, I believe his name is Tim Karen, maybe? Tim Karen, I believe his name is. He's a 7-0 middleweight. His last fight was November in Bellator in Connecticut. He's from the East Coast. I would scrape this kid, another undefeated fighter in his hometown, and I guarantee you I will make short work with him. Short work.
All right, let's figure out his name, and let's get him on here too, man. Let's go after him. Let's make this happen. I love doing this. If I have any type of part now, I can't prove I've had any part in this kind of stuff. Although I definitely have talked to fighters, and we've been talking about people, and then all of a sudden those fights get put together. So, I'm not gonna say it's because of me, but we can't disprove it, right? So we're just going to assume it is me.
My man.
Let's make that fight happen. And let's talk about your camp. Kind of the last thing here. Let's wind up. I mean, let's talk about your gym, because you come from a very iconic gym. How did you get involved with them? Where did you come from to get? I believe it's Iowa, but kind of tell us that. What's the story of you getting to American Top Team?
So I was already traveling. I'm from Iowa, but I had trained in San Diego, California. I was training there for a little bit, and then I came back to Iowa, and then from there, my next move. My big bro, Justin Lawrence, he's currently in Bellator right now as a featherweight. He invited me to come stay with him and his girl. And Rambo, their pet Yorkie. And so I did that in Arizona, and we were training at Power MMA. And that's where I did my camp for my fight a year ago for Victory, the last one I had before I went into Bellator. And then from that Arizona move, I kind of things weren't working out there really. Justin ended up going back to San Diego, and I wasn't quite sure how I felt about that. So I just wanted to change my environment. And I had already been to American Top Team a couple times prior, just for short stints. I wasn't a pro fighter yet. It was more so just training trips to do some jiu-jitsu and get the feel there. And I reached out to American Top Team, and the reception was well. They said, hey, come out for a week, and we will we'll see we'll go from there. So I came out, I stayed in the gym at the dorms, and, we put in a good week of training, and they said, you're a talented young kid, we'd love to have you out. So from there, it was history. I moved there in May, and I've been there full time since then, just putting in the work. And so many good fighters and coaches here. There's always something new to learn, and from somebody new to learn it from.
And one of the things I touched on earlier, I want to just go back and readdress it. So you're a 185-year-old middleweight, and you're 6'4", which is a big deal. I mean, there's other guys who are also pretty tall as middleweights, but you're definitely at the upper end of, I would say, of middleweights. I mean, 6'4" is on the upper end. So is that a weight that's is it hard for you at all to get to 1? Because you're young, so I highly doubt it's that hard. But do you have any intentions of moving up to 205 at any point?
Honestly, so I'm glad you asked this question. I enjoy 185 pounds. Well, I won't say enjoy. Out of my current options, that's what I would prefer. And why I prefer that is because I feel at 205, there would have to be a transition period. You know what I mean? At 185 pounds, I feel that that's the best weight for my body. It's when my body weight's low. And that's when I feel I have, and most times when I go into these matchups, I'm the bigger man, if you will. I'm taller and I'm longer. As you said, I'm on the upper side of that. At 205, I feel that would take away my advantages, and I would be a smaller fighter. Does that mean I can't do well there? No. I believe that I could be a good 205er. It just would take a transition period. So what I would like is, I believe that 185 to 205 gap is far too large. There should be a 195-pound weight class. And obviously that's something that's not going to happen, in the time period that I would like it to happen, which would be now. But I think that what I believe I'm going to do within the sport is great things. And I think I'm going to rise to the top of the 185-pound division, if not by the end of this year, at the beginning of next year. And at that point, I would like to introduce this 195-pound class. I believe it'd be good for business, not just for Bellator, but all promotions to add it. Because what you would be doing is you have plenty of guys who are decent 205ers and decent 85ers that are either too small for 205 or too big to make 85. You'd be getting super athletes, if you will. Imagine guys coming from light heavyweight, middleweight at their natural class of 195 pounds and competing, So this is something that I've thought about, and this is something that I would like to see. So if that would happen, that would be my preferable. I would love that. But if that doesn't happen, then I do think 205 is in my future. I'm, like we said, I'm only 22 now, so I feel that in 2 years from now, I don't think that I'll be at 85. No.
Yeah, I mean that's what sucks. I mean, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's true. Like, I'm also a proponent of the UFC and Bellator. I don't think Bellator does this, but certainly UFC doesn't. Like a cruiserweight. I mean, I'm also a fan of the 225, just because there's so many heavyweights that are way too small for heavyweight. I mean, some of these guys, and that is where you can get some brain damage. I mean, if you're walking in there 220 pounds, soaking wet against a guy who's cutting down from 265, that's not a good situation to be in. I would much rather see a cruiserweight there, 225. There just needs to be more weight classes. And for the women, like, how has the UFC not implemented a flyweight? I mean, that should have been before the 145. A flyweight makes more sense than even the 145 does to me. Although that's a debatable thing. But in general, I mean, I guess what we're both saying is we need to continue to reevaluate these weight classes. What you have now is fine, but there does need to be more. I mean, there's even issues with 155 to 170 for me. There's a lot of people that get left out where it just doesn't, it doesn't make sense for them to hurt their bodies cutting down to 150, to 155, but they're also just too big for 170, or too small for 170. I mean, I don't know. It's tough, but I don't really have all the answers, so I don't want to pretend like I do, but I do think my true dream, I guess, would be to see 10-pound increments. You wouldn't even have it be 25. It would be 20 or something, or 30. It'd go 110, 120, 130, 140 kind of thing. I don't know how reasonable that is, but regardless, I think we're both kind of saying the same thing. I guess why they have those big jumps is because they don't want people flip-flopping all the time. They want people to kind of find a weight class.
Lose a fight. Oh, I'm going to change everything up and go to this class, jumping around to the other side.
Because as of right now, it's still relatively limited. You saw it with like Pettis, where Pettis just could not cut down to 145. I mean, it was nearly impossible for him. And when he did do it the one time, he looked like death. I mean, he literally looked like he was a skeleton. It wasn't working for him. So I guess that's why they do it. They just don't want people jumping around. So especially at those heavier levels. They don't want guys jumping around a whole bunch, but I don't know. There has to be a solution because what it is now, I don't think it's not very inclusive. They got to do something.
Yeah.
But alrighty, there we go. I pretty much ran the gamut. Let's get you this fight. What was the name again?
I believe this guy's name is Tim, and his last name is Caron. Honestly, I'm not set on that fight. I think that would be a good fight for this April 21st fight. Anybody can get it though. ABG, anybody can get it, and I'm just looking forward to the future, man. I really want to get booked again soon because it's not easy out here being 22 years old, getting paid what we're getting paid on these scales. I'm not complaining, but I have to get paid, so I would love to get back in there and do my job.
Definitely. And that card was when again?
April 21st in Connecticut.
Let's make it happen, man. I don't know what we got to do, but let's make it happen.
Definitely. Let's make anything happen.
Yeah, right. Happen. You're like, I'll take anything, but let's shoot for that. And then if you get something sooner or maybe a little bit after, that's fine. But let's set our mind on something and cruise towards that.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate you having me on the show. Everybody who's listening, check me out on Instagram and Twitter. On Instagram, I'm on there, JAY185. And on Twitter, I'm on there, JAY_185. So check me out. I'm a young, up-and-coming 22-year-old, and I believe that I'm going to be top 10 in the world someday. So
wonderful, Jordan. Thank you for talking to me, sir, and we will talk again real soon.
Definitely. Appreciate you, my man.
All right. Bye.
Later.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. In addition to being brought to you by the Harmony Acre Soap Company, also brought to you by the Voball. The Voball is a exercise equipment that is easily adjusted to height, easy to attach, and then easy to store away. It bolts into your ceiling. There's 2 balls for different levels of experience. It's for hand-eye coordination, accuracy, timing, no limit of movement. It's for training boxing, training kickboxing. Again, if you're just trying to increase hand-eye coordination, or if you're just trying to break up a sweat. It's a great product. Again, I've said this a few times, a little bit hard to explain sometimes. So, go to thevoball.com to learn more. In addition to the Voball, and in addition to the Harmony Acre Soap Company, every episode is brought to you by the MMATakeover.com. Please go to the MMA Takeover to learn more. not to learn more, but to read their articles, read their rankings, read their articles. They post the schedule there. They're constantly updating it with new information and new breaking news. So it's a great company. Keith over there does our news episodes. So I cannot speak any more highly of them. I hope you guys enjoyed this interview with Jordan. He was a great guy. Genuinely, man. Literally, just awesome dude. So I hope you guys enjoyed.
The host of the LoudMouth MMA podcast, Kyle Steele. Executive producer and head of marketing, Philip Herman. Today's episode was mixed by Danny Adams, myself. Special thanks to the MMA Prophet, Sean I. Has, Dave Madden, Keith from the MMA Takeover, the Harmony Acre Soap Company, and the Voball. To learn more about the LoudMouth MMA podcast, please visit loudmouthmma.com.